program is working with some people who are attending or who are participating as speakers for the first time, but some people who do participate in the program for several years continuously, and in a way use this as an opportunity to present something and then develop it further or build on their presentations. And our next speaker is doing just that. Renato?
First of all, thank you very much to Mikhail for organizing this thing every year and for calling me back again for a second time. I'm very, very honored to be here in this room. Thank you for coming as well. Let me just very briefly introduce myself. My name is Renato Rivera. I am an assistant professor at the Meiji University in Tokyo, and I teach things such as anime culture and manga culture. Look me up online if you want. I'm going to keep this intro very, very short so we can get down to the stuff because I have a ton of information. So let's go. My title is Girls und Robots, Genre Demarcations in Anime. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to be talking about the different genre mixing that has been happening recently and try to explain that it's actually not a recent thing at all that's been happening in anime. So let's go. If you were here last year, thank you very much for coming. If you weren't here, here's a brief summary of what I was talking about. You don't have to have been here, but it helps because it forms the foundation of what I'll be talking about today. Basically, there's such a thing as the anime boom. It happened from 1977 to 1985, and it was basically a spike in the otaku subculture, which challenged business models. In what way? Well, basically, its aftermath spawned a wide divergence between the mainstream and the otaku subculture, unlike with manga due to the difference in generations, which I'll explain in a second. Previously mandated sponsor requisites became quintessential in anime tropes, robots, magical girls, etc. You had to sell robot toys for the boys, and you had to sell like magical, changing, transforming sticks for the girls. This is the way I explained it last year. Basically, you see the population changing throughout the generations. During the time of Tezuka's Shin Takarajima, you can see it's a perfect triangle, almost. The shojo manga Year 24 group, Takemiya, Keiko, and Hagio, Moto, all those people, I'll be talking about them in a second. They were one of the main reasons why manga became mainstream. And then you've got the anime boom, which is basically formed by the children of those previous generations. So that's why manga is a lot more mainstream than anime, which remains a subculture in Japan, despite what people say it's mainstream. It's actually not. Anyway, it took around 15 years for animation to be recognized as a viable subject to base magazines on as consumers came of age. The first anime magazine was actually from 1978, which was a long time, 15 years after the original TV anime. Nice music there. The original generation of fans created the market for anime magazines from a grassroots movement. Publishers and editors at the time were of a different generation, and they had little knowledge of the subject and couldn't understand what these magazines were about or what anime was about. And the fans, viewers, writers, creators, they all worked in tandem with each other during the anime boom period, which formulated a critique of the movement. And if you went to Shuji Kawamori's panel yesterday, you would know that he was one of the viewers and fans who then became people who worked in the industry and followed that. In 1982, 83, just as I was talking about, Kawamori made Macross, which was basically the culmination of this grassroots movement. Fans making their own anime. It was basically a doujin anime. And so there's this divergence between the sponsors and the creators. In 1974, Space Cruiser Yamato, right, was cancelled. But then it was revived as a movie, but then they made sequels, and then now it's a major franchise. Mobile Suit Gundam was cancelled, but then it was revived as a movie, and then there was a trilogy of them, and then they made sequels, and now it's a major franchise. Macross, it was truncated and then extended because it was so popular, and now it's a major franchise. And Miki Momo, it faced cancellation, they killed off the main character, and then they said, okay, let's extend it. And then and it's kind of a major franchise, and at least it would be more of a major franchise if the writer hadn't died, unfortunately. And I also explained this. The production studio used to get together with a major sponsor, and together they would go through the advertising company to the broadcaster to get the show on the air, right? Instrumental to this is, the pointer's not working, is the sponsor that basically formed the merchandising pillar of this, right? Which is why you got toys and everything. These days, everything is done through a production committee, and it's less of an interactive model and more of there's all these different tiny companies that are making this committee, and they produce the product, and then we as fans and viewers just consume the product. So there's no interaction between those two different sides. Okay, this is all just stuff that I talked about last year, which is up on YouTube, so you can watch that. Yeah, so people were very, very angry. The creators were very angry that some of these sponsors were taking over and they were deciding the fate of these characters. So they said, okay, you know what, we're just going to kill the main character. See how you like it. But then, of course, it was extended. So fast forward to today. This is a new content. So we are living now in the period where we have the remnants of the anime boom. So we don't really need to have robots and magical girls anymore, because those were just things used to sell products, right? But nowadays, anime is the product. So why do we still have giant robots? Why do we still have magical girls? Well, basically they're just tropes now. So let me just throw this question out there. Can anyone give me some examples of robot anime? Gundam, yes.
Macross.
Macross, yes.
Messenger.
Messenger, good. Alright, good, you know your robots. It's funny that nobody said, nobody said girls in Panzer and stuff like that, right? And I'll tell you why it's funny, aquarium. Always worth a mention. What about magical girls? Sailor Moon, Pure, Macross Delta. Here we go. Okay. Here we go. This is what we're getting at. Okay, but do you know that there's also like these subcategories? Super robot anime, there's real robot anime, magical anime, video shojo anime, idol anime. What are we talking about when we give these designations to these different things? What's a super robot anime?
Super robots.
Voltron? Get out! Okay, alright. And real robots?
Gundam. Double robots.
Gundam, Gundam, Moto? So what are we looking at here? What is this? Exactly, great marketing mashup. Okay, I went to Wikipedia to try and get some answers. And Wikipedia says, well, Macross is an SF robot anime. That's what it tells me. Alright, I guess I have to trust it. Created by Studio Nuermal. Fair enough. This is what it was supposed to look like. Did everyone go to the Shoji Kawamori panel yesterday? Okay, some of you did. He said that he had a product called Genocidus. This is what he was thinking of when he presented the idea to the toy company sponsor, and the toy company sponsor said, yeah, you know what? No. No. First of all, what is it? And second of all, we only deal with giant humanoid robots. You've got to put your humanoid robots in there. So I ended up looking like this, right? Okay. So, remember I talked, it was their doji anime, fans making their own anime. Shoji Kawamori, Mikimoto, Ichano, Hirano, all these people were just anime fans, except for Ishiguro at the bottom. He was the one who said, oh, I'll take responsibility for this mess. And look, it looks, you've got the internal workings in there, it looks very realistic, right? Real robots. Right. If you were online in January 2015, you would have seen that Goo which is a Japanese site, had a ranking that said, okay, which are the best, which are the greatest idol animes ever? And Super Dimension Fortress Macross was voted the greatest idol anime. Number 2, Creamy Mami. Number 2 is Creamy Mami, okay? Creamy Mami is like super mainstream compared to Macross. Idol Master, AKB48, Love Live, Aikatsu. Everything on this list except Macross is an idol anime in my mind up until I saw this. So I don't know what's going on here. Wake Up Girls is number 2, Furipara, Fancy Llamas. What is going on? So, okay, let's take a look at Super Robot anime, right? everyone knows Go Nagai. Some of you might not know the name Tadao Nagahama, right? So Tadao Nagahama is famous for the Nagahama romance series. I'll talk about those in a second. Basically, they're the Combat Lord B and Daimos and Lotus 5, the other ones that are not Mazinger stuff, right? The ones that combine. So, what are real robots? Well, some people mentioned Gundam, some people mentioned Dagram, some people mentioned Botoms, right? So, Tomino is all the Gundam stuff, and Takahashi is Dagram, Laser, Botoms, all that stuff, right? Okay, so I think we have a very good idea of what the difference between this and this is. What about Majoko Anime? Well, Majoko Anime is basically just the series of magical girls produced by Toei. All the stuff that was by Toei is just called Magical Anime. The Mahou Shoujo anime is a wider category, and they're basically the post-Toei ones, produced by Ashi Pro, later on picked up by Studio Pierrot. Right? So you've got Kuriyami there in the center, she's the most popular one. And then you've got Bishoujo anime. Well, we start getting into a more nebulous category now because it's just basically a genre that features beautiful girls. For males and for females as well, right? So I would say Sailor Moon fits into this too. I mean, there's a crossover between Magical Girl and Sailor Moon. I wouldn't call that idol, but that's just a personal thing. So I went to, this is a very dark picture, I'm sorry, but I went to Anime Japan in 2015, a few months after this GLUE ranking came up, and I saw that they had a setup where there was a viewing booth on a screen. They were showing lots of different shows, and they had a list of all the shows that they were going to show. And one of them was, like half of them were designated idol anime, and the other half were mecha anime. They basically split up these two different categories. And this is how they explained it. The first anime series in the history of Japanese animation was Astro Boy. Starting from this, robot anime became a popular genre in the next 5 decades. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, let's see this one. Idol anime is an increasingly popular genre that these days, with their singing, dancing, sound effects, and visuals. Each idol has their own life history, presenting histories beyond their glamorous life. Okay, right. Those are very vague descriptions. So what kind of anime do they have in this idol anime category? I thought it would be something like Precure, Aikatsu, Love Alive, that kind of stuff. But they said that the first idol anime was Sasurai no Taiyo, which is Wandering Sun, directed by Yoshiyuki Tomino. The origin of idol anime. And the other thing that's interesting is that, I don't know about you, but she looks like a folk singer, kind of like Joan Baez. And I looked it up, and she's actually, the character is actually based on Keiko Fuji, who is the mother of Hikaru Utada. Everyone knows who that is. Yeah. So, I kind of, like, I don't think she's an idol, you know, in any way whatsoever. But she's a woman who sings, so I guess that's what idols are. Okay, well, let's take a look closely at this list. Obviously, you've got the other earlier 60s stuff on one side. Sukat, fine. Kunimami, okay. Megazone 2-3, okay. Magical Envy. Oh, hang on! Megazone 2-3? Has anyone watched this anime? Apart from me, because this is what it looks like to me. So, I guess because it has an idol in it, Eve Tokumatsuri, who by the way is AI, before Sharon Apple, before Mikru. It kind of works, but I would never classify it as an idol anime, and I'm sure the producers didn't pitch it as an idol anime. Alright, let's take a look at what they got in the mecha section, shall we? Astro Boy, fine. Tetsunego, fine. 8-Man, okay. Mazinger, okay. Alright, looks good so far. Super Measure Fortress Macross, mecha anime on air, that seems okay. Roy is dead, spoilers. Okay, back to the idol section, shall we? Yoko So Yoko, Hummingbird, Naniso, Macross Plus, Kiribird. Well, what? So Macross Plus is also an idol anime, I guess because they love their AI idols.
There's five robot anime on that last list. Hummingbird, Macross Plus, Key to Metal Idol.
Yeah, you're right. There's robots from Hummingbird as well. But yeah, but they are idols, are they not? Kind of, yeah. I mean, I gave them a pass. So what's Rare doing there? This is the mecha section. Boys in blue, girls in pink. Macross Frontier. Alright, and they've actually done a description on this one. Macross F is a Macross series in collaboration with 20th Anniversary that contains the Idol, Love Triangle, and robot actions just like all the other franchises. With the main... Yeah, well, if it's just like the other franchises, then why on earth is the other one in a different section? Well, I got such a headache that I just gave up after this. So I decided to look further in the history to see if we can actually track down if there were general demarcations that just crossed over, or was it always, this is robot anime, this is idol anime, this is whatever anime. Right? So Macross Delta 2016. It's currently airing, everyone's probably pirating it right now. Because what else can you do, right? Mecha anime, super robot anime, real robot anime, medical girl anime, it's all of the above, really, in my opinion. So let's take a look. What is Macross? What are the standards for each genre? How have they changed over time? Is this a result of the post-boom shift in business models, i.e. toy company sponsors were no longer showrunners, and now anime literacy is a play on tropes and traditions? Well, let's investigate this further. I don't really want to get into this whole thing in too much detail, but let's take a look at what the fans have to say. I'll give you a briefing. The top guy is saying, well, I believe, Idol and Mecha is forming a good balance. That's basically what Macross is all about. Okay, fair enough. But this guy here at the bottom is saying, oh, you know what? Basically, these guys just want to do Idol Master with Macross robots in it, and I don't buy that. I think it should be all about the F-14 Tomcat. That's what I loved when I was growing up. F-14 Tomcat transformed into a robot. That's what I wanted to watch. I don't need any more of this other stuff. Okay, fine. What is this? Oh yeah. So look, listen. This is how I remember it. Okay, when I was watching Macross as a kid, I used to imagine that I was Hikaru Ichijo because I was piloting my Valkyrie, and it was a really cool robot. And then I could, be very lovey-dovey with this idol who was a singer as well. But if you imagine an idol group, which is what they've got in Macross Delta now, being lovey-dovey with a pilot, then they would have a scandal where she would have to shave her head. And obviously they're referencing this. Too soon.
Too soon.
And more, basically, yeah, you know what, as long as they don't have a singer that's worse than Ranker, I think it's fine. And the other guy is saying, worse than Ranker? What the hell are you talking about? And the guy here is, okay, you guys are going to be arguing about idols and whatnot, then why don't you just shut up and watch Cabernetti? That's better for you. And I agree. Probably the people who love the original Macross should be watching Cabernetti if they don't like the idol stuff, because it features Macross character designer Hagio Mikimoto, right? That's why they're watching it. Except the problem is that Mikimoto was famous for doing these shojo illustrations, right? Which is what they don't want in Macross. So what is going on here? It's such a mess that it just gives me a headache. This guy is saying, well, you know what, actually I'm going to skip all this because there's a lot. Basically, the final tweet that I have for you says, hey, it's really cool that Macross Delta is getting all this criticism right at the beginning. It just means it's going to succeed even more. So anyway, yeah, this isn't Macross, this isn't sci-fi, this is just idol stuff. So what are people arguing about? What is sci-fi anime? What is real robot anime? What is idol anime? Let's go back to the 1970s. And so some people said Mazinger when I asked for super robots, and some people said Gundam when I asked for real robots. Well, here's something interesting. Some people said Gurren Lagann as well, right? Well, the writer from Gurren Lagann, Kazuki Nakashima, said that for him, Mazinger Z was actually the first real robot, not super robot. And of course he was quizzed on, what are you talking about? Well, he said, as opposed to Tetsuji 28 and stuff like that. Mostly because Tetsuji 28 had pupils, and that was stupid. But to go into more detail, he says it was revolutionary because of the settings. He said that Chogokin Z and photonic energy was a pseudoscience. It is basically the pillar of science fiction. And also, all the enemy robots had mechanical names such as Garada K7 or Douglas M2, which was more realistic and also one of the main tropes of tokusatsu and robot anime creators borrowed from the highly influential Thunderbirds TV series, right? They're all a big fan of Thunderbirds, including Cowboy. which paved the way for the RX-78, which is, of course, the Gundam. So it's very interesting how most people say it's this, but this is really just one stage in the evolution of real robot anime. It was gradually becoming realistic, depending on what generation you were in. It's a generational factor. Again, that's why I showed you the population chart at the beginning. Okay, so the theatrical release of Mobile Suit Gundam, right in the middle of the anime boom, has been referred to as a social phenomenon. Production history being well documented, it mirrors Space Cruiser Yamato's trajectory in terms of its core popularity build-up, 1979 broadcast, which was entrenched in television rating battles, internal struggles with sponsors, and finally its explosion into critical acclaim following its 1981 movie edition, providing even more momentum for animation fan bases, both for Gundam itself and anime as a whole. Studio Nue was involved in the production of both, as well as Macross later, of course. However, its success was met with some contentious opinions from certain camps. It wasn't a hit overnight. Please note that the development of this science fiction discourse is parallel to the evolution of the anime magazine itself, the rise of otaku culture, and also the lolicon movement. Don't pretend that that's not relevant in any way. These elements intersect, interact, and feed off each other, because sci-fi fans love parody. So we'll take a look at these factors mostly from the point of view of the contemporaneous publications, in other words, animation magazines. Why? Because they're basically the internet of the 1970s and 80s. So you can see what the viewers and what the producers were writing and discussing at the time. So for most of this, I'll be using Anime and Out with such publications. So before Gundam, this is what we considered sci-fi anime. First of all, I'll give you the example of the manga shonen special, The World of TV Anime, which is a MOOC, which you may have heard of. It's a mixture between a magazine and a book. It was basically the first real critical publication on anime that ever came out. So very pioneering, praised by anime critics Oguro and Komaki. Main feature was on Yamato, as it always is during this period. Space Cruiser Yamato movie broke through the jinx and helped quell the idea that anime was just for kids. I'm quoting the direct article here. Giant robot heroes. Today, robot anime is a synonym for SF anime. What does that mean? I don't know. But anyway, so they're taking the idea that these robots are sci-fi, right? The era of sci-fi anime. True SF anime. And here, true SF anime is represented by Cyborg 009. Who's laughing? Okay, so outside of anime fandom at this time, there's also actual science fiction fandom that's developing in Japan, thanks to Hayakawa SF Bunko, which is a label of novels, basically translations of sci-fi classics, and also a platform for new experimental sci-fi from Japan. And gradually, more manga-oriented illustrators began to do cover illustration commissions for this, including Studio Nue, that you see at the end, and Matsumoto Leigh, here, in the middle. Right? So here's where we have to talk about Moto Hagio and shojo manga. Moto Hagio is a very popular shojo manga artist, with Toma no Shinzo, The Heart of Thomas, that kind of stuff. But in 1975, she brought out her own sci-fi shojo manga. They were 11, Juichining Yu. And in 1975, the same year, she had a conversation with Saikyo Komatsu, who is a very, very famous sci-fi writer. He wrote Japan Sinks. And so she became famous for having these conversations with literary, like very, very famous people. And in 1977, Hayakawa SF Bunko started commissioning Hagio as a cover illustrator, so there's one example there. They brought in many more female fans into the world of SF fandom, so people recognized her, obviously, and so they started reading science fiction because of her. And she had a conversation with Osamu Tezuka, where they talked about sci-fi manga. She had discussions with Hagio, Moto. She was Hagio Moto, hang on. She had discussions with Tezuka, with Lady Matsumoto, all these people, and they've been collected into books that you can read. Moto Hagio later on decided to do her own manga interpretation of famous literary SF classics. So, such as Ray Bradbury's R is for Rocket and stuff, and later on Ray Bradbury actually commended her for saying, "Oh my God, you visualized my novel perfectly." Okay, so while all this was going on, you've got the actual anime magazine as a format starting to come up, which I talked about last year as well, and of course Yamato always on the cover. Science fiction is really one of the foundations of the real hardcore anime fandom at this time. And in fact, Out is a magazine that became an anime magazine in around 1978, but it actually started off being a weird subculture magazine with Yamato being one of the special features that they had. So this is what it looked like in 77, and that's what it looked like in 1978, right? So it's like night and day difference. That's really the beginning of the anime boom. So in 1978, March, Out did a special feature on Studio Nue. Has anyone heard of Studio Nue? Okay. Well, this is what they did. They basically did a lot of sci-fi illustrations for Hayakawa Bunko, for other things. It was founded in 1972. There's this book called The World of SF Illustration, all about Studio Nue. It was later famous for Macross and all this series. They were basically made up of several people: Haruka Takachiho, Nariki Kato, Miyatake, Matsuzaki, Kawamori. What you see there is the cover of Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers, which Kawamori talked about yesterday too. And at the back, it's interesting. You see a giant super robot, right? This is definitely a Nagahama super robot. So let's take a look inside this book, right? Oh yes, lots of mecha, lots of really hardcore military, sci-fi, super space age, whatever, right? And so, oh yes. So what we have here is all the things that men love, right? So what we have here is the foundation of Gundam, as Kawamori-san explained yesterday, in the powered suit design that Studio Nue made for Starship Troopers, right? So they own this design. Obviously, Heinlein owns the Starship Troopers story, but all the later robots were basically based on this. And they did a lot of the internal art for some of these super robots. So they weren't so super anymore. They were more real. Okay? Let's skip to post-Gundam for a while. Yeah, Lolicon is very, very much a part of this particular period. Anyway, post-Gundam. Take a look at Out in April 1980. And you have a special feature on Gundam that is titled Gundam to wa Nandato. So what was Gundam, after all? What was it? And I should point out, this kind of title comes up very often. There's an issue of New Type from 2 months ago, or last month really, where they asked the same question about Osamatsu-san. Osamatsu-san to wa Nandato. So what was Osamatsu-san? So what does this mean? Well, when they ask this question, they're basically legitimizing the social phenomenon aspect of this series. In other words, no one expected this to be such a hit. So it prompts analysis, prompts critique. So there's lots of very in-depth articles and special features on Gundam, in particular on the sci-fi legitimacy of it. Is it really sci-fi? Is it not? So Kazuo Yamamoto is one of the writers here. He talks about the SF-centric queries and sorts of questions regarding SF in Gundam. Heinlein's powered suit is now a staple of SF, but Gundam is a piloted robot. So I guess they need Minovsky particles as a narrative justification to have these supergiant robots. So it's all about excuses, right? And if you remember Kawamori's talk yesterday, he said that he made the aliens, the evil aliens, giants, so that they could justify having a giant robot, because otherwise they wouldn't have any. It's totally unrealistic, right? So you can't. Real robot is an oxymoron, really. So let's go back to Keiko Takemiya, who is also a shojo manga artist who also did science fiction, who was also interviewed in this particular article. She's shown for Toward Terra. And she talks about the animation and the performance. She talks about Amuro, how when he hits the wall and he starts crying, then it gets very realistic to me. So that's the real robot aspect for her. in terms of the animation technology that they would use for future anime works, she says probably rotoscoping is the future. She's wrong about that. Oh yeah, and I just decided to put this picture up here because, you know, realistic sci-fi. Okay, so Haruka Takachiho. Again, Kamura-san mentioned him yesterday as well. An award-winning sci-fi novelist who is also the creator of Crusher Joe and Dirty Pair and the founder of Studio Nue. He popularized SF art in Japan. Asks, so what is science fiction? In this article. What is it? So here are some direct quotes. Takachiho. Oh, by the way, this is the same person. Okay, he's a man of many faces. Takachiho says, too many anime are being referred to as sci-fi recently. Yamato is not sci-fi. Ultraman is not sci-fi. The only one worthy of being called sci-fi is Future Boy Conan. Directed by Hayao Miyazaki. I have been involved with the staff at Sunrise, but I would never let them refer to Raiden or Combattler V or Voltus 5 as SF. Up to around episode 3, I had hopes that Gundam could become a great work of sci-fi, but after episode 5, it just became painful to watch. You play nice now. It sparked a major outcry. Where's your outcry, man? By anime fans, manifested in letters to Out, Anime&Manga, and other publications. What is this guy talking about? He doesn't know what he's talking about. Respect Tommy, know what Tommy is. Okay, so then there's this guy called Yu Mitsuse, who is another award-winning SF novelist, and he wrote in the Roman album Mobile Suit Gundam, SF fans are, you know what, they're not comfortable with Gundam. They don't like it. True SF fans would never watch something like that. Okay. So Yu Mitsuse's collaborations with Moto Hagio then are called into question because he collaborated with her on lots of SF works. So that means that robot anime is not SF, but shojo manga is? Makes sense to everyone. I was lucky enough to be living up the road from a Hagio Moto exhibition that was happening a few months back, so I decided to go and check it out. Actually, I also brought it. Before that, Keiko Takemiya, actually I already talked about her, so I'm not sure what that slide is doing. Basically, she was also very much, Keiko Takemiya was also very much being played up as a master of sci-fi in the shoujo manga format. So you've got, you know, Keiko Takemiya's F and SF land, F probably being for fantasy. So science fiction and fantasy were things that were okay to be melded in the shoujo manga world, but I guess not in the robot world. Anyway, so during the exhibition, or to promote the exhibition rather, Moto Hagio and Mani Yamazaki, who is another mangaka who's famous for Termae Romai, does everyone know that one? Yeah. Okay, had a talk event in April, and here are some quotes. Hagio said, well, we shouldn't worry about what is or isn't sci-fi. Termae Romai is sci-fi. Godzilla is sci-fi. And Yamazaki is saying, wow, you know, I wrote them, but I never thought about it like that. You showed me that many of the works that I like just happen to be sci-fi. And Hagio says, well, what about Ultraman? And Yamazaki was saying, Ultraman, yeah, I guess he's an alien, so I guess it's kind of sci-fi. Yeah, that makes it sci-fi. Fine, sure. Everyone is okay with this. And then this is the key quote here. Men think about it in a completely different way. If I ran out of time, I'm glad I got to say just that, because that basically is the conclusion of this whole thing. I'm going to go on. Hagio, in putting together this exhibition, they were struggling, and they asked me, the organizers, which of my works are sci-fi and which ones aren't, and so I answered, I have no division line. I don't know. What do you think? You're the curators. Yamazaki and Hagio both agree that Fujiko Fujio's 21 is a sci-fi masterpiece. This one here, you know, the creators of Doraemon. It's so simple that even kids can understand, but it deals with such vast themes of humanity. Just in case you don't know, it's about a space hotel. In other words, there's lots of aliens that go in there, and so there's cultural clashes. Fair enough. Meanwhile, giant robots. So, out, February 1981. So, the hype's building up because they're getting ready for the movie edition. Oh my god. So, of course, they're getting all this negative feedback about the Takachiho, you know, this isn't, tell me that's crazy. Shimotsuki Takanaka, who's a freelance writer, now he's a critic, said that TV anime has been cursed by sci-fi ever since Tetsuan Atu. What does that mean? Well, sci-fi's widespread precedes the relatively young medium of TV anime. Yamato drew pure SF fans and anime fans closer together, but they still do not overlap. And anime fans are frustrated that SF fans cannot see the greatness and refuse to see past the fact that it's anime. So basically, he's talking about stigma there. A stigma, by the way, that will never go away. It's still there because of the population division that I explained at the very beginning, which doesn't exist in manga, right? It's more mainstream. So Haruka Takashiho comes back, and here's where he starts talking about the SF mind. You've got to have an SF mind to make SF. In other words, you've got to have read all the standards of classic SF literature, Heinlein, all this stuff. So, April 1981. Out eats it all up. He's like, you know what, if we put these two guys together, we'll sell a lot of magazines. So, it's, you know, look at this headline. Takashiho versus Tomino. Deathmatch talk! Deathmatch talk. Deathmatch taya. Whereas not much of a deathmatch because they just talk about how great 2001: A Space Odyssey is. They talk about the SF mind, so yeah, I guess you're right. And I'm not even kidding when I say it devolves into a discussion about hair implants, because they're both bald now. No, I'm not even lying. They actually talk about it. So, Masaki Tsuji, story writer and Tetsuma Atom, Captain Future, Devil Man, Kitty Honey. He says, does anybody know what SF anime is? Does anyone know it? I don't know. TV anime and theatrical anime are totally different anyway. Which again is echoing, or rather a precursor to what many years later Hayao Miyazaki would say. Don't call my movies anime. They are manga films. He said that. Because of the bad stigma that anime has, right? Okay, question SF. Now we're bringing out the big guns. What is SF anime? Special feature. They put it right on the cover there. And so Anime asked all these people that were in and out of Studio Nue, all right, what do you think it is? Give us a straight answer. What is SF anime? So Yoshitaka Suzuki, the story writer on writing and all this stuff, he said, true anime culture will take 50 years to come to fruition. Yeah, that's now. We're living around that time period. 50 years after Tetsuo Anatomy is right now. Masaki Tsuji, Hiroki Toshiyama, Kenichi Matsuzaki of Studio Nue, they're asking, what is SF anime? And many of them answer, you know, the perfect SF anime is Doraemon. So now they're starting to agree with the shojo manga artists. Maybe you're right. Maybe women have the answer to all this, as they always do. New generations, Shoji Kawamori versus Yutaka Izuchi. So you've got to understand, this is before Macross, okay? These guys are still fresh out of high school, just entering college. And they're there, being interviewed. Why? They're not even famous for anything yet. So, this is what they look like now. Yeah. Kawamori, because you don't know, stands for U631, Macross and Cyberpunk, etc. Izuchi stands for Daimos, The Lion, Gundam Double Zeta, and Paleo, etc. Okay, so let us take some time to explain this. This is the third generation, bringing in a new wave. This is a direct translation of the title of their section in this giant feature. A new type of creator who had grown up with anime. Everyone else prior to those people had not. So Kawamori says, on the SF debate, he brushes the whole matter aside. He says, what is important is one's understanding of the real world and the formation of a believable world within the fiction. What is demanded in anime is not realism, but rather a functional reality within the limits of the work. So of course he's referencing things like, well, the sponsor has to have a bipedal robot, so how are you going to have that make a reality within that narrative?
Gravity continues to work.
Sorry?
Gravity continues to work the way we understand it.
Yeah, I can't hear what he says.
Gravity and such continue to work the way we understand it.
Okay. And he says, what's worse, he laments, is that it's not even about what is or isn't sci-fi. It sounds like they're saying, if it's sci-fi, it's good, and if it's not, it's bad. So, you know, he's criticizing the detractors in this case. So Izuchi then comes in and says, well, look at Kazuo Cagliostro, Lupin the Third movie. Everyone loves that movie, right? What?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Future Boy Kona, which I think is not a coincidence. Both of them are Hayao Miyazaki. But no one's calling him out by name. It's really interesting. As anime that SF fans enjoy. But not because they're anime, or that they're sci-fi, by the way, but simply because they're good. And therefore the debate is really one of miscommunication. Because by nature, people want to share information and need to do so using words but cannot agree on hard and fast definitions, such as in the case of science fiction. Right? Which is a callback to Hagio. Basically, you don't need any division lines. And now, of course, we get to the... What was Macross? Again, Macross died. It was a social phenomenon. Kenichi Matsuzaki, the head writer of Macross, he said, yeah, all the stuff, we had different ways of thinking. We had different ideas of what sci-fi was. We had different ideas of what this show was supposed to be. And here is the kicker. Fans of Nue, in other words, Studio Nue had been famous way before Macross for being the real sci-fi, hardcore, military space age action illustration house, design house that everyone loved if they were a sci-fi fan. And those fans were coming into it going, oh my god, new Studio Nue is making an anime. What are they going to do? They're going to blow everything else away. And they were really disappointed. What? Robots? But robots aren't sci-fi, robots aren't realistic, blah, blah, blah. So he said, I think our fans really were disappointed. They really complained a lot because they were expecting hard sci-fi. So this puts a lot of the criticism of Delta into perspective, does it not? Because you've got the people demanding we go back to this hard sci-fi, military, space age, whatever, of the original Macross, when it was never that. It was never intended to be that. The head writer admits that. So, Miyazaki and Kawamori have repeated this realism versus reality aspect as a major factor in the works of Studio Nue throughout the decades. Miyazaki, as recently as October 2015, at his exhibition on the Mikasa in Kanagawa. Someone earlier mentioned the Mikasa, the battleship. Right? So it all begins and ends with Studio Nue. 面白ければ何だっていいじゃないか. His quote in 1983, or 1982, what is it? This is 1981, sorry, before Macross. If it's fun, if it's interesting, then who cares? As long as it's fun, as long as it's interesting. But I should also point out that in 2004, when the Gunbuster DVDs were released, he actually said something that runs contrary to that. Because he's very aware that SF fans love parody. For example, Hideo Azuma, the little chibi girl that I showed you just a second. But he said that's highly dangerous. The work is, at its core, very heavily SF based, in particular Gunbuster, right? So it's a missed opportunity to make it all about parody and all about like schoolgirls in swimming costumes, which is what Gunbuster is, by the way. So it's a shame that it had to be full of callbacks and references rather than a wholly original work. So there is a need for demarcation lines. What can cross over and what cannot? So they go to and fro. Gundam Century, has anyone heard of this book before? One person. Yeah. A really important book. It basically cemented the SF status of Gundam, right? Everything prior to this was kids-oriented, like very mismarketed stuff. The Gundam Century was published by the Out editorial together with writers Matsuzaki, etc. And later on, they made a similar book for Macross called Macross Perfect Memory. Gundam Century has a section in it called Life in the High Frontier, which, as some of you may know, is either a parallel or an homage or just downright plagiarism of the ideas and designs of Gerald O'Neill, who was an astrophysicist at NASA, who was the one who designed the original space colony concepts, right, which Gundam used wholesale. So, you know, if you're going to have a whole section about this, then it basically cements the SF legitimacy of Gundam, right? So once the smoke has cleared, in 1982, you've got a new section in anime called the New Wave Anime. Two dreams, SF and anime. And the key quote here is that anime is trying to raise up what SF gave birth to. That's what we're trying to do here. So the two are actually joined. And by 1984, of course, the anime boom is at its peak. And it's all downhill from there, isn't it? Just kidding. So you've got all these movies coming out, Beautiful Dreamer, Macross You Remember Love, Nausicaa, and in this issue of Out, with Nausicaa on the cover, inside you've got Yumi Tsuen, again, the guy who said, you know what, us SF fans do not like Gundam, having a discussion with Moto Hagio about science fiction, true science fiction. So we've reached it now, it's okay. And of course, 1984, Macross You Remember Love. If you look at the covers of the DVDs recently, yeah, they've all got singing girls on the cover. None of them have giant robots on the cover. They're at the back. You gotta turn it over. Conclusion. It's anime. It's just anime. What is it? Is it SF? Is it super robot, real robot? No, it's just anime. So to summarize, the key points, right? The arrival on the scenes of Hayakawa SS Bunko flamed the passion of sci-fi fans in Japan. The shojo manga revolution, the year 24 revolution, and its diversification into sci-fi coalesced with this flame, bringing in female readers also. So the sci-fi fans had accepted manga by the mid-1970s. Anime had not yet come of age. The anime boom was just starting and would not reach its peak until later, which would be 1984. Anime fans were late to the scene, and amongst the shackles of commercialization, merchandising requisites, the medium struggled to gain recognition as a viable vehicle for hard SF stories. Yamato, Gundam, Macross all had major production compromises. The first two were cancelled, and the third one, like at the very beginning, gotta have robots in it. Fine. So this feud between the two camps was fueled by the egging on of publications such as Out. Hey, let's have a death match with these guys. Yeah, we'll sell more. And actually, it was good because we could take the debate even further. So this issue of genre demarcation lines, female fans tend not to care, right? And older males tend to be overly concerned. No, it's not, you're taking away my childhood. No one cares. Anime fans and SF fans eventually would find common ground in parody, but that's a story for another day. I think that is it. Oh yeah, I have to plug some stuff. So there's a website that is dedicated to this kind of content. If you want to check it out, it's called Deculture Shock. www.decultureshock.com. You can find it on Facebook. On Twitter, I have just joined Twitter. I don't know how to use it. The GUI is killing me, but it's there, Renatology, and also Culture Shock has its Twitter too. There's other kinds of articles that we have. Remembering Nobuo Ishiguro, I went to his memorial service, which was attended by Leiji Matsumoto and lots of really, really important people, the writer of Legends of Galactic Heroes. So if you are interested into that kind of stuff, then go check it out. I think, miraculously, we might have some time for at least one question, right?
We do have time for a few questions.
Well, thank you very much.
Mike, I think we've got about 5 minutes. So yes,
If any of you have questions, and we'll expect a few of you do.
So with your conclusion of it's anime, are you fixing that anime actually defies demarcation?
What's my conclusion of what, sorry?
You mentioned before your conclusion was...
Oh, okay. My conclusion on...
that it's anime.
It's anime.
That, are you suggesting that actually that anime, by nature, defies demarcation between the genre?
I'm suggesting that we're getting to that point. Yeah, it's... if you look at recent anime, none of them really fall very cleanly into any of these old demarcation lines.
What a sliding scale then.
Yeah, well, we're kind of on a sliding scale right now. And I think a lot of people in the mainstream recognize anime as being a genre. Whether that is correct or not, I think it's because of the stigma that we have.
Next year.
Next year? All right, I'll start working on it.
All right, any other questions?
As someone who's both a sci-fi fan and an anime fan,
Yes.
Have you ever heard the term soft sci-fi?
Yes, I have.
It's coined by sci-fi people, but I think if they just coined the term earlier, it would avoid that whole debate. Because clearly a lot of the stuff they think not sci-fi, it's just soft sci-fi, where it's, so it's not what they needed was a sliding scale of sci-fi hardness.
Yeah.
But I think that would solve a lot of the whole debate thing, because it's basically, yes, it's sci-fi, but it's not hard sci-fi. And that's a distinction that people didn't draw, but it seems a kind of weird thing to argue that it's not sci-fi. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And what I find very interesting is that you never, at least not as far as I found, and I've looked through these publications, with what I believe to be a fine-tooth comb, that you don't find the term soft sci-fi, but you do find references to hard sci-fi all the time. Yeah, in Japanese, hard SF, right? But everything else they just call just SF. So they're making that distinction, but they're not actively calling it out. Which is, you're right. It's worth wondering why that is, and maybe asking the relevant people those kind of questions.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll have time for 2 more questions.
This is maybe a follow-up to the past one, the previous question. Because it seems to me that a large part of this debate seems to be focused around a group of fans who want to call these series, when they're saying the series isn't sci-fi, they're calling it out for being inferior in some way.
Yes.
Do you think that's a fair characterization? It seems to me that the point is to somehow cast aspersions. The point isn't to try to include it and say, well, how can we include this in sci-fi? I think, would you agree that what they're trying to do is cut these things out?
Absolutely. That is absolutely correct. And, that's one of the things that Calamari was actually talking about. He said, basically, it boils down to these people are saying, if it's sci-fi, it's good. If it's not, it's not. It's bad, right? And he is of the opinion that that's a very, very dangerous road to go down, because sci-fi changes, even hard sci-fi changes with the development of actual science, right? And so what was sci-fi, what was hard sci-fi 10 years ago is definitely not hard sci-fi today. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Those guys are trying to get everything out, and I guess they're trying to have their own little club, maybe, to make it sound really, really bad. Yeah.
Right.
You guys not coming in.
Yeah, we've got 1 more question.
Yeah.
Do you believe that in the future, for anime, we could see a new sort of genre split, or do you think it's really just going to be where the genres mix further?
That's a good question. I think it's going to be more and more of genres mixing and genre splitting, because I think that the genre mixing is going to appeal to a large, more mainstream crowd. But there's always going to be those people that want their own little thing, and that's marketable as well. And I don't hate Gundam completely. Okay? But from what I hear, and that's probably why the room is so empty right now, there's a Gundam Thunderbolt screening right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and Gundam Thunderbolt was made for those people.
Yes.
Right? So there's always going to be a market out there for targeted directly to those minor things on the outskirts, and those people are always going to be there. So I think, and to add one more thing to that, I think the future is also mixed media, not just mixed genres. And mixed media ties into mixed genres as well. Multimedia products, right? Exactly.
All right, well, Renato, again, thank you so much for coming. Based in Yokohama or in Tokyo?
I'm in Tokyo.
Okay, well, again, then thank you coming all the way from Tokyo. Thank you for joining us. And if any of you guys want to get Renato's contact info, if you have any